Hey dev team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag, and with the start of a brand new project, that fresh smell of a project that's beckoning forward. So what are we going to be doing? Well, you might be able to see from the title that I've created. We're going to be making a app for a fictional conference event type app, and we're going to do this including it's going to be the full stack application. We're going to write the back end as well as the front end for this. We're going to create the servers that we need and do all sorts of wonderful stuff. This is going to be for a fictional conference, which I've just called Global Con for Global Conference. And we're going to have features such as user and events. The events might be bookable. I'm thinking that we'll be able to include payment facilities there, such as Google Pay, GPay, and Apple Pay, and what have you. We're going to have maps, and I think this will allow us to do all sorts of different things as we go along. This isn't fixed, this is just some ideas that I've thrown down. Thing to note though, from the app point of view, there's not going to be registration within the app. We're going to assume that the user has registered on a website somewhere else, registered for the conference, and this is the app that they can then download and use to book into events, to see where the events are, to find out information on the speakers, maybe to book their hotel accommodation. Who knows? We'll see where it goes. So we're going to have a login. They're going to have a profile, maybe able to book events, mark events as favorite, mark events maybe as have some sort of an alarm or some sort of notification that that event is happening, so we can use notifications and add in that sort of thing later on. Maybe QR code generation so that their phone can be scanned so they know people know what's going on. And so all sorts of stuff. Now, I've started a design, and as you know, those of you who follow my channel a bit, I'm not a designer, but we're going to do something along this sort of line. We're going to have a login page to start with. We're going to have an events sort of list of things that are going on, the dates that the event is happening over, 3 or 4 day event. We're going to have some sort of event detail, who the speakers are, whether this person can book, favorite it, so on and so forth, and some sort of profile page for this person. Now I have done the design a little bit further than that, something along these sort of lines here. So I'm not fixed on this. This is all flexible. This may change, and we'll just see where we go from there. So let's start. And we're going to start this one by creating our Firebase project. So I'm just going to call this Global Conference. And I've already, Global Conference. There we go. And in fact, no one else has used that before. Great. So analytics for this project. Well, we might put analytics in, but I'm going to turn it off for now, and I will add that in later on when we come to put that in. So we're creating the project, and we'll just give it a second. Okay, our project is ready, and we're in. So we don't need to do too much in here to start with, although I am going to come to Firestore, because what we're going to do today is just start to create the backend server that's going to manage this event for us. So I'm going to come to the Firestore database, and I'm just going to create, once this is all set up, I'm going to create a database in test mode. We're not worried about security at all. Where are we going to do this? We'll do this in Europe West, but you can set yours up close to you. Okay, and we're in. And we're going to start off by creating in our database a collection, and we're going to create a collection of events. And that's going to be the thing we're going to start with. So we've got some events, and I'm not going to put much here. I'm just going to put a title for it. Starting with Flutter. We'll give it an auto ID and save that. And so we've got in our collection, events collection, we've got this one document and it just has a title starting with Flutter. Let's create another one, an auto ID, a title, and we'll call this one Advanced Flutter. And there we go. That will do as our data for now. That's all we need. Next, I'm going to come up to this cogwheel up here and come to Project Settings and come to Service Accounts. But what we do need to do is generate a new private key, and we need to download it and save it. Now I'm going to do that in a second, but before I do that, I'm just going to come over to our code window, and this is a brand new Flutter project. It's completely untouched. The main.dart still got all the comments in and the counter, but we're not going to be touching Flutter today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder called server. Now you may very well want to put that server somewhere else in another directory, not under the Flutter. I'm putting it here for convenience because when I commit this to the repository Git, then we want all this to be together. It just makes it easier for you if you're downloading it. This server does not have to be within this project. What I'm going to do now is click on that generate new key, download it, and I'm going to move that into the server folder, the downloaded file, and you'll have a file like that. And I'm going to rename it service_account. Okay, so we have that file, and now we can get on with it. So I'm going to come to my terminal and go into my server directory, and I'm going to run npm init. Now, for this to work, you need to have Node installed. If you haven't got Node installed, head across to nodeJS and follow the instructions to install that for your environment. Okay, once that's installed, npm init, package name, well, I'm going to call this global conf server. Doesn't matter about the version number, description, or anything else. I'm just going to take all the defaults and create that. And then I'm going to install a couple of modules. So the first one we need is something called TypeScript. The next one is something called concurrently. Then we need nodeDaemon. And I think that's it for the development tools. So I'm going to save that as the dev tools and give that a second to run. Okay, and then for the non-dev tools, we're going to need Express, which I'll talk about in a minute, and also Firebase admin. Oops. And I need to put the I in to install, npm install Express and Firebase admin. Okay, so if we look in our package.json file that's been installed, we have the development dependencies that we saved, and we have the dependencies that we've saved. The rest of it we'll sort out in a moment. Now, what is TypeScript? Well, if you've not used TypeScript, it basically is a way of using types within JavaScript, within JS or nodeJS. And it makes the code a lot more resilient, and you're less likely to run into errors. However, you do need to compile it. So TypeScript converts it, the program converts it from TypeScript, which is effectively JavaScript but typed, and converts it into JavaScript. So to get that set up, we need to run npx tsc, which is the TypeScript command line, init. Now npm and npx are effectively the same thing. It's just npx is locally, it's not looking at global packages, and because we've installed TypeScript already, that's where that tsc is coming from. So what we're saying is run the local tsc command and the init of it, and what that will do is it will create for us this tsconfig.json, which is full of comments and stuff. So I'm just going to clear this out and delete all the comments. Oops, deleted too much there. And just leave in the things that are not commented out. So just give me a second. Okay, so I haven't taken anything out or changed anything. Sorry, I have taken out all the comments. That's the main thing. Now there is one thing I need to add in here, or a couple of things I need to add in here. One of them is resolve JSON module, and I want to set that to true. That will help us when we're importing the file, the service account file that we've just downloaded. And the other thing I want to put, and it doesn't really matter the order, but I also want to put in an out directory called dist, stands for distribution, and that's where our TypeScript is going to be compiled to. Okay, so let's create a new file, and we'll just call this index.js, and we'll just put in a very simple bit of JavaScript. Hello world. Now, coming to our package.json, we're going to create a script here to make our life easy, which I'm going to call serve. And this is where I want the concurrent program to work for us, the script. Okay, so what do we want it to do? Well, I want it to do, I need to escape a couple of quotes there. tsc watch, which is our TypeScript compiler, and that's going to watch for changes, and also no daemon quiet dist index.js. Let's save that. Now, if we run npm run serve, hopefully we get hello world. Okay, let's get coding. So, what do we want to do? Well, we want to create here a web server, and to do that we're going to use Express, which we've installed. So we're going to import Express from Express. Okay, so let's create our web server. So our web server app is going to equal a new version of Express, and we're going to say app get / and I'll explain this now. Request response and the code. Okay, so what have we got here? Well, we're importing Express from that package that we installed of npm, and we're creating a variable that is the Express. And then we can use this app. And what we're saying here is we're going to set it up so that if this app gets a get, or if this server gets a get request, and remember you can have a get request or a post request, delete or an update request, you can get different types of requests. If we get a get request at the index, essentially at the home page, the default, then do this. And Express gives us the request and a response. So from here we can say response send hello from the Express web server. Okay, save that. Now we're getting some errors down here, don't worry, we haven't got going. One of the problems is a mistake I've made. This index should be called index.typescript, otherwise it really doesn't like things happening. Okay. And now it's created the index for us. It compiles it for us into JavaScript. Let's come back to the index.ts. This is important. Okay, we then want to listen. We want our app to listen to a port. I'm going to, for now, use port 3000. And once that is in place and it's running, I'm just going to console log server is running. So let's save that. I need to stop it and run it again. There we go. So now our server is running. Okay, let's pull up a web page and go to localhost 3000. And there we have our hello from the Express web server. Okay, so just to be explicit, if we were to put something else in the URL here, such as /test, we will get an error, cannot get test, it doesn't exist. And if we look at our code, this is where this is coming from. If we were to change that to test and save it and reload our web page, we're now getting that. So this is basically the URL, this is the resource that we're getting. Okay, I'll put that back and get rid of our test. Okay, so what do we want to do now? Well, we want to be able to get a list of our events from the database. And so we need to set this up. We need to set this up so we can access the Firestore. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call this firestore.ts. Let's get the TS bit right. And we're going to use the Firebase admin to access everything. Now, this is somewhat risky in that Firebase admin doesn't require any permissions. It has all the permissions. So at the moment, our Firestore database, we've set it to be test permissions. Basically, it's world read writable. But if we'd set that to be completely locked down, i.e. no one can access it, well, using Firebase admin tools, we can still access it. So it basically means our server is going to have to, or is going to have full access to all the resources within Firebase. So we need to be a little bit careful about security, and right now I'm going not to ignore that, and we will fix this later on. It's very important we fix this for later, but at the moment our server is basically going to give everybody access to everything. Just be aware of that. We will fix that later. So import star as admin from Firebase admin. That means import the full package Firebase admin package, everything from it as admin. And we could put anything there. We could put, as Bob, as Drag, whatever. Admin just makes sense because that's what we're going to do. We also need to import our service account, and I'm just going to call that service account. Service, not server, although it doesn't matter, it's just a name, from service account.json. Okay, so essentially this becomes an object with all the stuff that's with this JSON. We then need to initialize the admin package. So we're going to create an initialize app, and that takes a credential, and it takes different types of credentials, but the one we're using is the service account. So it's admin.credential, it's a certificate, and it's our service account. Now TypeScript is going to give us an error here. It's going to say that the argument of type string project ID private key blah 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 does not match. That's what it wants, but what we're giving it is a string essentially, because it doesn't know what it is. So we're just going to cast this as an admin.service account, and that error will go away. We're basically saying that this variable, this object, is a type of admin service account, and we're passing that to cert, which requires a service account. Okay, next we need to get a instance of our Firestore from there. So I'm going to do a const Firestore equals admin.firestore. So from the configured admin, get us the instance of Firestore. And then so we can use that everywhere else, we're going to export Firestore, and I'm going to export it as DB just so it's less to type later on. I'm also going to export admin because that's going to come in handy, I think, as we go along. So that's our setup and our configuration, and there's going to be more in here as time goes on, but that's our basic setup. Okay, next we want to create a set of controllers, really. We could do everything, not in there, we could do everything in our index.ts, but it's better to split things up. So I'm going to create a new folder, which I'm just going to call controllers. And in there, I'm going to create a file, and I'm going to create the first file, which is going to be our event controller. And it's a TypeScript. In here, we need an instance of the Express router. And that should import for us, auto import from Express, yep. And then we need to look at what we're going to be doing here. And we're going to be using we're going to create a CRUD API. And if you're not familiar with CRUD, it just stands for create, read, update, and delete. So we're talking about resources. So this API that we're creating, this REST API, we're creating the event part of it. So this should be able to create events, read events, update events, and delete events. Well, to be honest, for now, I'm not sure about the create, update, or delete. I'm not sure that's needed yet, because I think our events are going to be created by the admin, not by the app users, so that there should be no need for an app user to create, update, or delete an event. So we're just going to focus with read, and we may very well come back and add those other bits later. So when we're reading something from a web server, we're using the get request. So when you go to any website, just as a standard web page, you're issuing a get request to get that document, that web page, from the server. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to set our router to get at the root of the collection, the controller, and we're going to have a request and response as we did before. All Express routes have request and response, and then we can put our code here to get what we want. Now we're going to be getting something from a Firestore database, so we know it's not going to be instant, so it's going to be an asynchronous request. So const docs equals await db, and you can see there it's trying to auto import it from that Firestore document that we've just created. So that's correct, we're importing db from Firestore. So just to be clear what's happening here, we have this Firestore file and we're exporting this as db. Again, we could have called that anything. I could have said Firestore as drag, and then in here we'd be importing drag from Firestore, but we're not, we're importing db. So from the db we're going to get the collection of events, and in this particular instance we want to get them all. Now that's going to result in a, if we hover over here, we can see that we're going to get a Firestore document data returned to us. Okay, and that's going to be an array of all the documents in that collection. So at the moment we have the two documents, the two test events. We're going to get both of those back. Okay, so we need to convert that to JSON so we can send that back. So I'm going to put in here const result equals the data that we're getting back, sorry, the documents we're getting back. That would be better to call this document data, less confusing. Hang on, document data. So document data, the documents in it, and we're going to map that. And for each of the documents in there, we're going to return an object which has an ID, and the ID is going to be the document ID. So that's the unique code that was generated on Firestore. And then we're going to use the spread operator to return all the other data. So anything else that is within our Firestore collection document, it's going to be returned, and that's all going to go into this field. We can then, we saw a minute ago how we could do a result send and send a message back, but also within Express we can specifically say we're sending back JSON, and what we're sending back is the result. Okay, that's it. Now we need to make use of this. So to do that we need to export the router as the event controller. Coming back to our index then, what we can do is we can say app use at the resource location event. What we want it to use is the event controller. Okay, so when we come to / events, it's going to pass everything to this here, and so at the root of that event it's going to run this code. Let's save that. Let's come over to our web server, and with a bit of luck, if we put event in here, we get nothing. And that's because I didn't save the index. So just save the index and refresh, And there we go. We have our ID coming back. Why don't we have our title though? Because another typo, the data is a method. So d.data. So we just need to put our brackets around there to indicate that is a method. And refresh. And there we go. We have our data coming out. So if we had more data within the documents, then that would also be passed out as well. Okay, well, that's great, but we might want to get access to one of the events. So I'm just going to copy that. The way we want to do that is by putting a slash after it and the event ID. At the moment, we've got a cannot get that event. All right, let's come over to our code and just get rid of some of these spaces and let's code that. Now that's going to be very similar to that, what we've done already. We're going to say route get at the same root part, but we're also going to say after that we're going to accept an ID, and Express understands that :id is basically a variable holder, so it doesn't matter what you put there, it will turn it into this variable for us. Again, this is going to be an asynchronous request, and we'll have the request and the response. Okay, so this time the document snapshot, this will be, because it's a single, it's going to be await db collection events. This time we want a particular document and we want to get that, and the document we want is going to be the request parameters ID. So the request is this that Express is providing. It has an object called parameters, and ID we have specified there. Okay, and then we're going to simply return, well, yeah, okay, let's return the response JSON, and again the ID is going to be, and we can get this from two places now. We can get this from the document snapshot ID, or we can use the request params ID. They should be the same thing. And also we want to get the rest of the document snapshot data. Okay. Now, if we come over to our web page and we paste in the event ID, we should get that one event ID. But what happens if we've got a random thing? Well, it's sort of returning just the random bit because there is no document data. And I think we want that to be a little bit cleverer. So back in our code here, we're going to say if document snap exists, except we're going to inverse that. So if it does not exist, i.e. if there is no document with that ID, we're going to return the result with a status of 404 and also some JSON with an error message, event not found. Yeah, so if we refresh that now, we get our event not found, and if we bring up our dev tools and go to our network and do the same thing, you can see it's a 404 document, 404 not found. Whereas if we go to an event that does exist, we get our event, we get a status 304, that's cached basically, but that's fine. Okay, that is the very basics of our backend done. This is only the very basics, and as I say, there is absolutely no security in here yet. We're going to cover all of that, but for now we will leave it there. That's the setup, and in the next episode we will get our Flutter app up and running so we can read the data from this API and start building the app out. So folks, if you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It does help me out, and I hope you join me in this journey. If you do, hit the notification button to be notified when the next episode comes out. I'm planning to release it every 2 or 3 days as we go through to getting it out. So we'll see you next time. Take care, folks. Bye for now.